My name's Tim Bevins. I'm an urban designer with Global Green in Los Angeles, and I'm here to talk to everybody about ribbon gardens, which is a DIY approach for food desert mitigation. So first off, what's a food desert? Well, a food desert, according to the USDA, is a low-income area where the majority of the population has a difficult time, meaning they live more than a mile away from an area where they can get fresh fruit or vegetables. That's about 23.5 million people in the United States, and of that 23.5 million people, 57% are extremely low income, meaning that they have an AMI, area median income, well below the area average. In our research, we found that there's two primary contributions or contributing factors to behavior within a food desert. That's access and options. So access meaning what you can get to within a reasonable distance, a reasonable walk time. And once you get there, what options are available to you? Is it a liquor store? Is it a grocery store? Is it a restaurant, or is it somewhere in between? So we were invited to investigate this by a community group in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we worked in Oakland, California. So all the orange there are food deserts in the Bay Area, and we're going to zoom in to the right to Oakland to a neighborhood named Elmhurst. Now in Elmhurst, you can see that there's a lot of options. There's a lot of options surrounding the neighborhood within a mile, but what those options are, when we take the same data and we explore it in a bar graph, you can see that the majority of it is fast food and liquor stores. So while the options are there, that within a walking distance is really, really unhealthy, and then even more so, the the alternatives to really unhealthy food are few and far between. So we started thinking, what can we do here in the neighborhood? And compounding all of this is the reality that the area median income in Elmhurst is 55% below the average, and 45% of that money that is earned is spent on housing and transit. So now we know that any proposed intervention is going to have to impact time, distance, and choice. So we started looking around the neighborhood, and we noticed that there's a lot of these barren planter strips in front of all the houses, and they're mostly just compacted dirt. We did a little bit more research, and we did a little bit more research, if I can go back one. We did a little bit more research, and we found that while the city owns them, the onus to maintain them falls on the property owner, meaning that you can build on them as long as they're not permanent structures. So we ran some calculations. There's nearly about a basketball court's worth of open space, which is about 1,400 pounds of food per year that can be developed or grown per block. We see that this has been done before. I'm going to jump ahead quick because of the slide problems, but there hasn't been a regularized approach. So working with community members, we developed a kit of parts. And that kit of parts is a series of easily pre-cut and easy to install, easy to assemble planter structures. And each of those kit of parts is readily identifiable and all done with a very close eye towards cost, because we want to distribute these free to members of the community. So the idea is that we have a palette of options, and so from the casual cook to the full-on farmer, you can tailor your interest to how much you want to grow. So these are some visions real quick, before and after, and we're trying to also provide context and character to the community at the same time. So we built a proof of concept. This is 4 people and a rabbit looking at 5 different cameras. And this is the then mayor of Oakland, Gene Kwan. And our next steps are implementation. So either about 10 blocks or a full-on neighborhood, all with the idea of getting them free for the residents of the community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Could you describe a little bit more about the work that you're doing with the residents to teach about how to...
Yeah, so we were funded by the San Francisco Foundation and to work in the neighborhood in Elmhurst, Oakland, with CBE, Communities for a Better Environment. And with them, we had a series of stakeholder meetings, and there was a lot of discussion around food, and we explored a couple different options from the food hubs that have been discussed in the previous presentation, and we came up with this growing because there seemed to be there was a neighborhood, well, really one person that was really leading the charge, but she had a bunch of people behind her that were interested in urban farming in an area where there isn't that much open space. So that was how we rolled in the community into the entire process.
What would be the next steps that you'd take to
test and ensure that your assumptions are right about building urban farms?
So a couple answers there. We worked with a professor at Berkeley to kind of run the numbers on what we could grow and realistics for that climate. And then all of the materials are pre-cut so that they're really easy to assemble, and you could do that with community members on a build day, something like that. Another element that kind of tests it against reality is that they're all very simple structures, and that's by purpose. We want them to be identified as part of a whole, and that comes into the painting schematic, but they're essentially just boxes that have been specifically designed for that space constraint and have a little bit of flair to them, but there's nothing prohibitively expensive or prohibitively difficult to construct.
What are your next steps for understanding the true demand on the part of residents to actually grow food in these places?
Sure. So what we'd like to do, and why we're searching for funding to continue this, because it was really a funded research project, is to work through CBE, the local nonprofit in Oakland, to basically knock on all the doors and see how many people we can recruit. There's no illusion here about 100% participation rate. It's really, can we get 7 on a block? Can we get 5 on a block inside a neighborhood that starts to speak? And then there's this iterative growth that builds upon itself where you have a feedback loop. And then with that, you're able to supply more and more food to the neighborhood.
Grace? I actually had a question about not just adoption, but maintenance then. Like, are there some hypotheses that you have that you want to test in terms of ensuring maintenance, whether there's like a neighborhood, like a block captain or someone?
Exactly. So going back to the woman's name is Esther, and she's kind of like the golden child of what a block captain would be. She's well-connected, people like her, and she's strong, so she can encourage people to help out. The actual materials, the planter bed, the bed that the compost will rest upon, has a life of about 5 years, and the Berkeley professor was like, just don't use treated wood, just replace that, it'll be fine. 5 years is totally fine. So we really want this to be tied into a community effort, not just something that gets plopped out of space.
Nella, then Zane? Shane?
My question's about just the larger systems change that you think that this can affect?
Yeah. So this, and that's a really good question, Nella. So this is not the final end-all solution. This is a temporary stopgap that solves food access issues now, as opposed to 7 years from now when contracts and negotiations go through to get a supermarket there, which may or may not shutter in 5 years. This is an ability when we're approached by members of the community that say that they want fresh and healthy food, well, we can do it in about 4 months.
Excellent. Thank you. And Shane, you'll have the first question for the next round. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.